Hello, my name is Ian Campbell, a future educator, and throughout this PowerPoint presentation, I intend to cover various topics and my vision statements in relation to those topics through the lens of my future career and specifically how I will embark on creating a culturally inclusive classroom while combating common social problems. As an educator, it is absolutely inevitable that there will be a plethora of various types of learners derived from various cultural backgrounds passing through my classroom over the years to come. Inclusivity in a classroom must be established by the cultural anomaly rather than the majority, so that though that individual's culture may be the least represented statistically, it stands up to the majority in terms of inclusion and awareness, and therefore the student is not left out. I must have a classroom that is prepared to accept and integrate an individual of any background in any way in which they will feel their cultural background is respected and represented appropriately, which will facilitate their flourishing as an individual. Given that students of varying cultural backgrounds will have learned specific behaviors and routines, we can therefore surmise that those behaviors and routines impact the way each student learns. I, as an educator, must integrate a multitude of educational styles and activities to facilitate the success of various culturally based learning types. Hidden curriculum is the instated promotion and enforcement of certain behavioral patterns, professional standards, and social beliefs while navigating a learning environment, as stated in the Journal of Education and Practice. Being aware of this as an educator can be very important to the thoroughness of the education which you are providing. In my own classroom, I will attempt to provide a hidden curriculum of passion for learning and respect for subject matter through my own passion for the curriculum being discussed and placing my own longing for more information at the forefront of the way I run my classroom, and therefore my students will learn those traits as well. Children are social and active, and the classical classroom setting is not assistive of these facts, and therefore students can be rendered incapable of performing well due to this factor. The modern classroom allows personal space, face-to-face teacher-student interactions, readily available technology, comfort zones, and center-based learning stations. Furthermore, students must be enabled to feel that their learning environment is a safe space which they can freely express themselves, exempt of the possibility of bullying or negative feedback. Their learning environment may not be the typical spotlight of the educational establishment, but it should be front and center in my own focus as an educator in order to produce the best possible results with their students both emotionally and socially. The purpose of an educational space is to facilitate the development of the student, ensuring that their needs are met and their ideas are listened to in order to substantiate that goal. In my own educational space, I intend to instill a feeling of ownership in the students which will translate to a sincere sense of belonging. Material culture is defined as referring to the objects and artifacts that make up our teaching and learning experiences as per our PowerPoint notes in Lesson 3. Providing a material culture which supports cultural inclusion is important in creating an environment which once again students can feel they have ownership of and therefore have a sense of belonging within. I intend to create this sort of material cultural culture through the provision of visual and tangible material which students can relate to culturally. The achievement gap in education refers to the disparity in academic performance between groups of students, which is a definition provided to us in a PowerPoint for Lesson 4. The achievement gap, according to both Education Week and the Research and Business Economic Journal, stems from a multitude of variables such as low funding in schools, a lack of education on the personal part of the parents, and coming from a low income family. Because the variables are so widespread, and I, as an educator, must remain aggressive in the ways in which I attempt to combat this issue within my own classroom. Combating this issue starts first and foremost with setting a standard for all of my students irrelevant of my preconceived notions about their situation and its relation to their potential gap. Furthermore, all students need to have an equal opportunity to participate in a first-class learning opportunity, which I intend to provide equally to all my students regardless of socioeconomic background. The development of cultural bias in our students begins in the home and can be exacerbated and practiced wrongly in the educational environments that they participate in, given that the educator is negligent and ignorant to cultural bias being present in their own classroom. I, as an educator, must keep in mind that a student's whole existence and identity is grounded in their cultural heritage, and that I must be careful to not be the focal point of some sort of cultural discomfort by using culturally biased material in my own lessons or exams. Once again, this is combated by genuine interest in the students and their backgrounds, making acceptance of various cultures an aspect of the curriculum, and maintaining an open dialogue where students feel comfortable expressing themselves and their cultures. As an educator, it is my prerogative to provide an educational experience which is void of cultural discrepancies disallowing learners to succeed. Therefore, I must provide an environment that nullifies bias and potential for individuals to be academically singled out due to their background. One of the greatest tools an educator can utilize in facilitating accepted diversity is the enhancement of diversity in and of itself through ideas such as culturally responsive teaching, which seeks to use students and their cultures to produce a meaningful lesson material. As an educator, I must seek to overcome my own innate biases when creating class material and examinations to ensure that none of my students' cultures are disabling them to succeed due to my own cultural ignorance. Cultural conflict is defined as a type of conflict that occurs when different cultural norms clash, as per the PowerPoint in Lesson 6. I believe that the cultural conflict is an issue which must be tackled from the top down in a classroom through leading by example and being the first to jump into the deep end through exposure. Just as in the approach to culture and learning as a whole, the best option of action for addressing cultural conflict is open dialogue and honest conversations, starting with the educator about their life and where they have come from and how it may relate to the students in the class. Usage of pop culture in a learning environment can best be described by Gustavo Fishman's utilization of comics in the classroom. In relation to this topic, he states, cartoons and comics are examples of complex symbolic processes examined through the lenses of art studies, psychology, sociology, anthropology, and semiotics. Students are a product of the popular culture of their day, and therefore to meet them on their own terms, so to speak, may be the most lucrative format in which they will learn in a relatable and retainable way. Therefore, it is my goal to saturate my class in a curriculum with which contains reference material which will make the students aware that this subject relates to them, their lives, and the world around them. In an article written by Polly Greenberg, there is a statement which states that educators should incorporate routines into the school day in order to support each child's emotional and social well being. The incorporation of rituals by the educator on behalf of the child accomplishes the previous goal in two ways. It provides a positive ritual-based foundation which is approved by a responsible, well-meaning adult, and it negates the possibility that negative or toxic rituals are developed instead through a lack of already established rituals. It will be my own goal within my classroom to fill the ritualistic void with positive behaviors and traditions, not only to mold my students into well-behaved learners, but to mold them into socially acceptable and well-established adults. Culturally responsive teaching is a mindset and a way of conducting oneself as an educator, which goes to facilitate building bridges between students' cultures and teaching and learning, as per PowerPoint in Lesson 7. An educator which correctly utilizes culturally responsive teaching will actively draw on students prior to cultural knowledge in order to fuel lesson plans and curriculums, creating an environment of relatability and personal development through personal experience. Within my own classroom, I plan to implement several strategies in order to facilitate a culturally responsive teaching environment, such as sharing knowledge about myself as a person, inquiring about my students' needs, learning about who my students are and where they came from, providing culturally relevant and minority inclusive material in my lessons driven by the students that are currently present, and incorporating cultural exposure in the form of lessons about lesser known cultures, or perhaps even field trips to places such as the local Native American reservation. That concludes my PowerPoint. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and have come away from it with a greater understanding of my own cultural inclusive goals within the classroom as a future educator. Thank you for your time.